All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. There is real football in the air. We got players on the field. Get us all caught up and ready for the first preseason games. Our good buddy Lake Lewis Jr. from the Sports Journey. Lake, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Good to see you guys.
Always enjoy having you on. We always learn something. Let's see, we're about, halfway through camp, Lake, getting ready to start preseason games. There are adults in the building now. We got coaches that it feels like are coaching the players hard for the first time in a while. Before we get into the bones about it, give us a broad overview of what it's felt like at camp so far.
I mean, it's been exciting. You're seeing some really good hard work being put in, but you're seeing the players be coached, and I think, from years past, maybe they were getting coached and we didn't see it in front of us, but with our own eyes, with our own ears, you can see that these guys are being coached, and I mean, really. I don't want to use the word demonstratively because that makes it sound like they're being yelled at, because they're not. They're being given, a lot of encouragement, a lot of love, so to speak. But at the same time, they're being asked to be sharp, and their practices are shorter, so that they can have more mental time to figure out what they need to do, have more time to recover for their body. So, I like what I'm seeing. I think that these guys are definitely headed in the right direction. And for the first time in a long time, guys, it looks like they're having fun out there on the field. Practice is practice. It's hot outside. Sometimes tempers flare. Sometimes, guys just want to get out the sun. But these guys are practicing and they're having fun doing it, so much so that when practice is over, you probably have 50 to 60% of the team staying out on the field doing extra drills with their coaches or doing other things. So it's not one of those practices done. We heard that final whistle. Let's get back in the locker room. So everything is positive right now.
Like it's all brand new from the very top to the bottom. We've got 60% of the roster turned over this year. I'm curious what some of the older guys that have been here maybe have said and spoken to you about what it's like to have some of these guys like a Bobby Wagner, a Dante Fowler that's been around the block a couple of times and seen some things. Like what kind of feels to me like it would be reinvigorating for some guys that have been through some things in this organization.
Yeah, that's a great point, Doug. I mean, I think when you speak to guys like I've talked with Bobby, talked with Terry, and Terry's happy, man. I mean, he's like a kid in a candy store. Because, he's being coached, and he and Bobby Ingram have forged a really nice relationship already. His wide receiver coach, Penn State, we are. He literally was just talking to me a couple practices ago about how it's not hard. Get them the ball in open space, get them the ball down the field. Well, guess what? They have a quarterback that can do those things now and make really quick reads, quick process of information. And I think that's going to benefit Terry, who's happy. And then, you talk to the John Allens of the world, Daron Paynes, and they're just excited. And I think for those two guys in particular, it feels a little bit more like Alabama, where they are being instructed on, where to be at all times, where to be in their technique and their gaps. And I think Daryl Tapp is kind of bringing that energy, as former player himself, bringing that energy across the defensive front so that these guys just feel like, we're being asked to do things that we do best and not asked to do at all things that we're not capable of. And that's the big difference from years gone by.
You don't have to be a player to understand the game. You don't have to have been a former player to coach the game. But there are a lot of former players on this team in coaching roles, and it feels like the players enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, why shouldn't they? I mean, listen, when you're being coached, by a high school coach. Sorry, I had to throw that out there.
You throw that in there? Okay, go ahead.
I mean, listen, if I'm a professional, which we all are, if someone comes in and says, "Hey, this kid just graduated high school or is in high school, is going to teach you about media, teach you about journalism and stuff." I mean, I went to college for this. I'm a pro at this. I mean, I don't want to hear that. And I think that to be honest, that was Bush League, to even have that man considered to come in and do that. So now that, these guys look across the board and they see guys that have coached and played and did it at a high level, how can you not respect that? If you're the linebacking room and you have a Bobby Wagner, a first ballot Hall of Famer, if he decided 5 minutes from now, I don't want to play football anymore, he's getting the yellow jacket the first time he's available.
Absolutely.
So you have a guy like that. You have a budding star and a Frankie Louvu who's going to, in my opinion, make the Pro Bowl this year because he's playing alongside of Bobby Wagner. You have a young guy, Jordan McGee from Temple. Remember that name because he's about to become a household name for Washington. Well, guess what? They're being coached by Ken Norton Jr. I mean, he's won Super Bowls. He's done it, How can you not want to listen to a guy that did it? The same thing that you're doing currently on the field. He did it at a high level, and he's a really good coach, so you have the best of everything. I just think that a lot of these guys, a lot of these position groups, like we talked about, I mean, if you're Brian Robinson, how can you not be excited to be coached by Anthony Lynn? And if you're not, guess what? Austin Eckler will remind you how his success came because of Coach Anthony Lynn. So there's just so many guys spread around the room right now that, the defensive line we talk about there. Listen, guys, those defensive line drills are violent. And when I say violent, I have film to prove it to you. I mean, it's a lot of hand smacking, a lot of technique, a lot of cursing, guys running around. It's total chaos. And that's how Daryl Tapp wants it. He said, because if you can't do it now, you're not going to do it on Sundays. This is the kind of stuff that everybody should be excited about, players being coached by guys that did it. And if they didn't do it, they've been coaching long enough to understand what they need to do.
Tapp's definitely a high energy guy. So it seems like there's a lot of positive energy coming out of Ashburn right now. It's mostly due to relationships and connections between the coaches and the player. I'm just curious, have you noticed anything like tangibly, like in regard to structure of practice or like the way things are formatted or the schedule of the day? Is there some tangible differences you noticed from this year and last year and things you think are improving our team?
Well, first and foremost is the practice is shorter.
Okay.
And they're going about an hour, 20, 25 minutes. I mean, and it's consistent. A couple of days when the fans have been there, they stretched it out. They stretched one out to almost 2 hours. I wouldn't say they were necessarily practicing for 2 hours, but that was one of those rare days because even going back to OTAs, even going back to rookie minicamp, the practices have been an hour, 25 minutes. And that's in stark contrast to years past where the practices were 2 hours, sometimes longer. And, you saw the product on the field suffer. Guys were just mentally not sharp. They still didn't know where they were supposed to be. How many times we've seen guys in the secondary, arms up, looking at the other guy. You were supposed to be there. No, you were supposed to be there. So there's a big emphasis now on making sure that you know your assignment so that you can play fast and you can play free. And I think the practices being shorter has proven that these guys are able to get in there and really stay focused for an hour, 25 minutes, as opposed to 2 hours. Because let's face it, we are in DC heat, So when you think about summers here, I talked to Marcus Rosemy-Jackson, and who's from Florida, played at Georgia, and I asked him about the heat, and he was like, "Well, it's not quite as hot as Florida," and I said, "Yet." So, I told him, "Yet," but again, you think about all these things. I just think that the speed of the practice, the pace of the practice is fast too. So it's not like they're out there for an hour, 25 minutes, and they're walking to their next position drill. They start practice as you guys have seen, everyone has seen. They start practice with a little bit of a competition, offense versus defense, to get through shuttle runs, drills, little things like that. And it gets the practice started before it even starts. So you get the energy, the juices flowing, and then these guys are right into it. Some of the first things that you see is that they do a lot of special teams. They do that almost every practice. As teams early, and some guys are off in their position drills, but the special team, there's a focus on that. And I think that that's something they identified was really poor for this team over the past several years, almost neglected, to be perfectly honest with you. When you think of the botched snaps, the missed field goals, blown punt coverages, kickoff coverages. I mean, you should see a stark contrast this year because they've really put an emphasis and an onus on that starting practice, not at the end of practice, starting practice with it. And then they get back to it at the end of practice. So they start in practice, with special teams.
Interesting.
Is the day one kicker on the team right now, Lee?
I think so. I mean, the two guys that they have battling it out right now have been pretty good in practice. I mean, every now and then you'll see a miss, but for the most part, these guys have been, I'd venture to say most of camp, they've been at the 80% mark. I mean, clearly, maybe a tad higher, maybe 83%. They're just not missing too often. I mean, I know there was some miss yesterday, but I liken that to it's raining. It was a different field. I mean, just little things like that. But I do like what I see with them. I don't think it's going to be such an anomaly or a hole for them like it's been in years past. I mean, in years past, Joey Sly wasn't bad, but you held your breath when it was big game kicks,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we started holding our breath when it was extra points. so now I think their bases are covered, and whoever does win that kicking job, I think will be their kicker for the duration of the 2024 season.
Gotcha.
It feels like we've been behind the 8 ball. I know there were like some contractual things that kind of held them up, but these joint practices late is something that's building momentum throughout the league. One of the best ways, we know what the preseason games actually do. It's more for the guys trying to make the roster. The real work to see where you stand up against some of the other teams in the league are in these joint practices. Didn't know you were there in Orchard Park. What did it feel like up there?
I mean, listen, it's just guys getting after it. Again, wet time, it was wet on the whole East Coast, so with that being said, there were things that, were done okay. There were things that clearly need more work, but I'd like to preface this to the fans that, are seeing all the gloom and doom today about how porous and terrible they look. Listen, they're practicing against other teams and they're practicing a lot of the things that they don't do well. It's not a show to go up there and pull out your 10 best plays. They already know that those are their 10 best plays. They need to work on the next 10 plays that aren't so good. And that's what these joint practices are for. You're going to see it in Miami next week when we're there. It's going to be, not so much the, Emmanuel Forbes on Tariq Hill's show. No, they know that he can't cover that guy. I'm just calling it out like it is.
Tariq Hill, man. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But what they can do is they can say, okay, how can I get a cover 2 over or a single high safety out there and see how these things work. And I just think that, the fans have to understand it's early, it's practice, and it's not a game. So they weren't going up there to see who won the final score. There was none of that. It was, working on certain things. And, the thing that impressed me the most was Jayden. He looked pretty good. And if your young quarterback can show you that in a practice against a different team, nice touch on some of his passes. Some of them could have been better. But for the most part, his grasp of the offense and understanding of where he's supposed to throw the ball at all times, it's pretty consistent and it's pretty impressive considering he hasn't played a pro game yet. He already seems like he has the offense in tune with what he's trying to accomplish. So I'm excited to see him having another opportunity to practice. Screwed preseason game. I know he's going to play a series. Maybe I don't think he's going to play more than that. But, it's preseason. But I'm more anticipating and more excited to be in Miami next week, not for the preseason game, but for the practice against them to see how he fares against the Jayden Ramsey, see everything that they can do, how the offensive line holds up is going to be really important.
Brandon Coleman, real quick, George, Brandon Coleman didn't practice? Did they say why?
No, we're not supposed to say why. He'll be, just put it this way, he'll be fine.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, this is a different coaching regime, and they have a different policy with us. Is you can't report an injury or you can't report an illness, and I just did both. So the point is that I didn't say who, but the point is they don't want that kind of stuff leaking out, and I'm cool with that. I respect that. It keeps that gloom and doom stuff from going. But let me just tell you, the couple guys who've been sitting out and stuff like that, they'll be just fine.
Yep.
Perfect. So you kind of touched on it, like about I think the whole season revolves around Jayden Daniels and his evolution and his growth throughout the year, right? I was just kind of curious what your thoughts on your impressions of him from camp. It seems like he has great command of the offense, making good progress, good process with what he's doing. There were some reports that he had a bad day yesterday. I'm kind of curious if you thought that was overblown. And if he did have a bad day, what do you think? Was it the weather? Was it the defense kind of throwing a curveball? What was your impressions on all that?
Well, I think the first thing that didn't help him was the offensive line. The offensive line struggled yesterday. Yeah. You're talking about one of the better defensive fronts in football for the Jets. Both Williams guys. They're monsters. You've got really great corners. Obviously led by Sauce Gardner. So this is a defense that has the potential to be a top 3 defense. I think they were top 5 last year. They're going to be even better because they have a quarterback on the other side of the ball that's going to not make them be on the field the whole game. So they'll be better. So this is good work. And then you think about, like I said, I'm not going to say why, but if you think about, certain guys for Washington, starters that didn't play on the O-line, you're going to get those kind of results. And it was wet, raining, soggy, just terrible conditions. But I think Jayden did some things well at times. His checkdowns are there. He just sees the field. So even if there's not a completion, it's not a lot of passes that are going to be picked off either. I mean, so he's not a turnover machine. He's not a guy that turns the ball over. You can count 1 or 2 interceptions all training camp. You just look at what's going on in Chicago with Caleb. Caleb looks good, but he has had several interceptions throughout camp. So, these are little signs that you have to keep in mind going down the road. That Jayden just doesn't turn the ball over. So, despite the struggles at times yesterday, he had a couple really nice passes. The pass to Dyami Brown down the sidelines was just that's a throw most guys can't make, and let alone drop it right there in the receiver's hand. I just look at stuff like that where, when you see it, and like throughout camp, when you see it in person and you see the velocity which he throws the football, and for the most part, the accuracy. And I tell people all the time, the ball is out of his hands in 2 seconds. I mean, he's dropping back, boom, 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 sees where he wants to go, and it's boom, it's there. And we haven't even seen the wheels yet. So think about that. You haven't seen him be unveiled as far as just play free. And if that means you run the football, that's what you do. No, they're telling him to stay in the box right now, stay in the pocket, make your reads, and that's where he is. So, no, I'm not deterred by anything I've seen at all. And I'm looking. I mean, I'm trying to be a hard critic here. There's just nothing to not like about this guy. I mean, everything is there. He's a franchise quarterback for sure.
Quick follow-up to that. It seems like Dyami Brown has had a pretty strong camp, and I think that's been really interesting, really eye-opening, because I feel like a lot of the fan base have been maybe down on him recently. I'm curious. We know Terry McLaurin is going to probably be the number 1, Jahan Dotson number 2. Is the battle for wide receiver 3 even close to being finished? Is it Dyami Brown's to lose? Is Luke McCaffrey kind of on his heels? What are your take on that? Like, what do you think wide receiver 3 is going to be for Washington?
Well, I've been saying, since they drafted Luke McCaffrey, he was going to be their number 3 wide receiver.
Okay.
I still don't see a reason for him not to be. Yeah, Dyami's making some plays, but I think they're calling his number more to see what he can do. I mean, because let's face it, the knock on Dyami was that he was a one-trick pony. Like even college, go deep and that's it. Well, you can be a one-trick pony now, and it'll work because you got a guy to get the ball down the field. That's where his strength was at LSU and Jayden Daniels. So, I think Dyami's catching intermediate routes. I mean, he's doing everything to put himself on the roster. And if you would have asked me this maybe, right before training camp started, maybe even a week into training camp, I would say Dyami was on the bubble. I really thought that he had to prove a lot to make this roster. Well, he's done that. But let's make sure we say this too. We've seen this from Dyami, even with not the best setup in the world for him, he still proved that he can play football. Now he's being given a chance to kind of shine a little bit. And I think the team would be better for it if he can continue this, make the team, and still do that throughout the regular season. It gives them 4 legitimate threats on offense at the receiver spot.
We've been kind of talking about this, George and I have all off season. Everything will be brand new. The offense, particularly brand new. Cliff Kingsbury comes in with perceived, and people perceive what his offense will be like. He's had a couple of years now to kind of look at where the league's at. They bring in Anthony Lynn, Brian Johnson. Like those two guys, to me, both kind of do what Cliff wasn't very good at, as far as like marrying the run game with the pass game or the play action. Do we have any idea what the offense will actually look like this year? I've heard rumblings they'll be using 13 personnel this year.
Yeah, I mean that's another great question. I'm telling people right now it's going to be a balanced offense. It's I mean you have a rookie quarterback. You don't want to throw the world on him just yet. Maybe later in the season, if he has like C.J. Stroud type setup and it's just clicking. Yeah, you put it on him later, but early. You got to turn the ball. You got to turn around and hand the ball off to Brian Robinson Jr. I think he's going to have a big year. I mean, you have the Pro Bowl wide receiver on the outside. You have a Pro Bowl tight end. People keep forgetting Zach Ertz, 3-time Pro Bowler, who looks like he's found the fountain of youth, by the way. Knows Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is familiar with Brian Johnson. I mean, and obviously you guys know Zach Ertz is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary, period, on offense because he's going to become, and he's already done it in practice, he's the security blanket for that rookie quarterback. Most young guys need that tight end. They have one. And I think that for Cliff Kingsbury, you can let players just play. And again, let them play free, let them play fast. There's talent there. They don't need to be restricted. Just so many little nuances that he's doing in this offense is different. You guys know that the receivers struggled to get off the line of scrimmage last year when they were pressed. You see a lot of motion now. You see a lot of two guys on the same side. I mean, they're doing things to mix up the looks of the offense. I can tell you guys this nugget too. After practice, a lot of times you see Luke McCaffrey, potentially your number 3 wide receiver, taking handoffs in the backfield from Anthony Lynn, or running wide on some of these formations. And that's to have another offensive weapon coming out the backfield. So I think you can see the creativity is going to be there with the offense. They're not going to be predictable. It's not going to be, just the same old nonsense we've seen for years gone by. And then you have those veterans. You have the Zach Ertz, you have the Austin Ecklers, who can help pick these guys up when adversity hits. Because in years past, when the adversity hit, I mean, Doug and George, this. These guys would tuck their tail and it was go home.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the case now because you have veterans who've proven it and recognize when it's coming. They can recognize, say, hey, we got to pick it up a little bit here. And they're more vocal guys too. Zach and Austin are vocal guys. They speak up. And then we're not even talking about on the defensive side of the ball with Bobby. Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvo. These guys are you hear them on the field, and they're more lead by example. At least Bobby is. He's kind of like Terry on the defense, but no offense to Terry, Bobby's got a yellow jacket coming to him.
He does,
so
absolutely.
Right, so you're going to listen to these guys. Not saying Terry won't, but we know right now, as of today, Bobby's a Hall of Famer still playing. I just think a lot of guys benefit from that. The John Allens of the world benefit. And then you have guys like Cleveland Farrell. People don't talk about that. Dorrance Armstrong. Those guys are vocal out there, and in the Armstrong situation, he knows the defense that Joe Witt's trying to do and Dan Quinn, so he can help guys along at the same time. Jeremy Chin in the secondary is another leader out there that is going to help some of these young guys in the secondary. So hope I understood off your question.
No.
Yeah, man, it's just good stuff.
Like, is that a contrast from last year? Like the communication and the leadership and the the vocality? Like, is that okay? I was curious.
And George, it's not just that it's in contrast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like living on Earth and going to Mars, man.
Wow.
Seriously.
Okay. Okay.
And I say that because the guys who were living on Earth last year didn't know where their home was.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't even know where their house was located. So you can't be vocal if you're still trying to find your own location, So that's what it was. And I think now that you have some guys who've been in some of these systems and have familiarity with some of the coaches, they're able to be coaches on the field now, not just you're hearing it from an Anthony Lynn if you're a Brian Robinson. Well, guess what? Austin can say, I know Coach Lynn wants it this way, and let's do it this way. And you've just seen Brian's game has already gone to a whole nother level, and his confidence has too.
I love it.
If you're a fantasy football guy, that's the guy you want for sure.
Before we get over to the defense, because I do want to talk about it, I'm curious if he said anything, if you have any opinions on. I think about Cliff Kingsbury and his time off. I wonder if he's happy just being able to get back to drawing up plays on the whiteboard and having some fun on offense. Not everybody's cut out to be a head coach, and I wonder if he shared with any of you kind of where he feels like he's at now at that stage of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's happy. He's excited. He is. And I think, he understands the long run is that if you have some success with this offense and a rookie quarterback, you're probably going to get another look to be a head coach again. And I think
do you think he wants another shot?
I'm sure he does. I mean, most competitors never, you guys notice you're competitive. You're never going to say no to an opportunity if it presents itself, and if the money's good, you got to look, But I think for him to know that he had some success in college with his air raid offense and some of the things he was doing, his players, went on to greater pastures led by obviously Patrick Mahomes. So of course, he thought that he could do it. And his stay in Arizona wasn't all bad. I mean, the first year was actually pretty good. You thought they were on the upward trajectory. I don't like, guys like, you know me, I don't like coming at guys. But listen, from people I've talked to and spoken to, Kyler Murray wasn't considered to be a leader, in the locker room. DeAndre Hopkins came out and said it, publicly. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. So those are little things that if your quarterback's not a leader and it's not really, messages aren't really being received, that's just going to trickle down into everything else. And I think that ultimately that was Cliff Kingsbury's downfall in Arizona, was probably Kyler Murray. So you think about, now he's got a chance to regroup. He was at USC last year as kind of an offensive consultant. You can probably say, I helped Caleb Williams become the number one pick in the draft. So his body of work is still fluid and it's still good, and I think from what I've seen with Jayden and what they're doing with some of the other players on the offense with Terry, he's utilizing Terry like Terry was back at Ohio State. It's not intermediate routes and that's it. It's Terry going down the field. Terry is a 4-2 player, but no one would ever know that because he's never been asked to play fast. So now he's back to doing what he loves, and who doesn't want to go deep on passes with that kind of speed and hands? So again, I think for Cliff Kingsbury, I think this is a golden opportunity for him to have some success and get some looks. I just hope, for the sake of continuity, it doesn't happen so soon that he could be one and done. That's what you don't want.
Exactly.
The league, they poach, assistants to have success, and hopefully for him, he can have a 2, 3, maybe even 4-year stay before he moves on. But I do think ultimately you will see him coaching again. Yes.
All right, let's start looking at the defense a little bit. A name you mentioned earlier that I feels at least like he's not getting a lot of attention paid to him is Dorrance Armstrong, really the big money man from the free agent period.
Yeah.
How has he looked? Because we haven't heard a lot about him.
Man, he's as advertised.
Okay.
The guy's a freak, man. I mean, I hate saying that about people because you think to me that they have like 4 ears. No, he's a physical specimen, and nice motor. Dan Quinn, Joe Witt, they love the guy, and I think that there's certain players because they came from their system, they came from Dallas. Certain guys you don't need to see what they can do. So it's not about what they're not doing. It's just this coach knows what I'm going to do for him come Sundays. They're looking at the other guys that they don't have a whole lot of history with, that they're trying to figure out. A lot of these younger edge rushers, the KJ Henrys of the world, the Andre Jones Juniors of the world. These are the guys that you have to take a look at because you know what you have in Farrell. You know what you have in Dorrance Armstrong. And to answer your question, I think he's going to have a big year. I mean, what did he have? 8.5 sacks last year in Dallas, not getting all full reps. So here he's got a chance to surpass that number and really make an impact on this defense. I think he's definitely one of the slept on unheralded players in this camp and around the league that I think is about to have a breakout, really breakout season where people are like, man, this guy's pretty good.
Another person I think I'm kind of curious about, we haven't heard of much of, is Jeremy Chin. We've interviewed some people coming on our show. They were like, he was a breakout star. He was a potential rookie of the year, 100 tackles, very dynamic, big-bodied safety. I'm just curious what your impressions are so far. We haven't really heard much about him. I'm curious, is he playing linebacker? Is he impressing you in camp? Is he strictly a safety? What are you seeing from him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely impressed with him. I mean, he's done everything. He's played back at safety. He's come up to the line in the box. I mean, he's a big guy. He does not look like a traditional safety for that matter. I mean, he's kind of in the Cam Chancellor mode. And guess who coached Cam Chancellor?
Yeah, exactly.
Dan Quinn. So clearly they see something in this guy that a lot of people saw, as you said, George. He was the runner up to Chase Young for the defensive rookie of the year. So he can ball. He can play football. Unfortunately, he was playing for a bad outfit in Carolina where you kind of get lost in the sauce, like Frankie Louvu as well. Exactly. But I think that he's going to have a big year for them. I really do. He's smart. He's kind of like that coach on the field as well. Really a lot of his game is right here, and that's important to be back there on an island as that safety, the last aspect of the defense, the last wave of the defense. So I think a guy like Quan Martin will benefit from a Jeremy Chin, just his experience already. And he's still young. I mean, it's not like he's a 10-year veteran. This is his fourth, fifth year.
Yeah,
so,
fifth year. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So he's still young himself. But
do they have him at strong safety and base, Louis? Like, is it Quan at free safety and Chin at strong safety and base?
Yeah. And see, I think you're going to see them like be interchangeable. You'll see a lot of that. I mean, you go back to those Dallas defenses, their safeties at times would play cover twos, and then sometimes they would come in the box. They would rotate who came in the box. You're going to see all kinds of looks. And guys, I'm telling you this, this defense won't have a base look. It just won't. I mean, everyone's like, oh, Lake, man, it's funny because Cleveland and me got into a little playful. He jumped on my Twitter at the draft when I was in Detroit. I tweeted out when they drafted Johnny Newton that don't be surprised if you see Washington in some 3-4 with Payne, Allen, and Johnny Newton as your three base guys up front. And Cleveland jumped on my thing. He said, my God, man, you're being misinformed. He said, we're not going to 3-4 base. So when I see him at camp, I'm like, come here. Hey, hold on, man. Listen, I'm not saying that's going to be your defense. I'm saying you're going to have all these looks, and that's going to be one of them. And he said, of course, man. And I said, well, damn, don't you think that's what I was talking about? So anyway, he's like, yeah, I just don't want to put my hand in the dirt. That's all. He wants to come around the edge. So the whole point I'm saying all this is that they're going to have so many different looks that we've never seen. You're going to see 5-man fronts at times. You're going to see 3-man fronts. I wouldn't even be surprised if there's a time you might see a 2-man front, and then you have everything behind them. So just get ready to see some modern professional football on both sides of the ball and on defense. They're going to be fast and after it. And so all the talk of the demise of the secondary and things like that, stop. Stop.
They've obviously been cooking Forbes on Twitter. And listen, Garrett Wilson is going to smoke people. Tyreek Hill is going to be, receivers get paid good money to be very good. I'm more curious your thoughts. You at the top of the show, we were talking about coaching, and you mentioned the high school coach who was indeed the DB coach last year. We're talking about a rookie corner being put in a terrible position coaching-wise. How far behind is he simply because they weren't getting coached right last year?
Well, no, that's an excellent point as well. I mean, you guys are bringing up great stuff today. Listen, I keep telling people, to me, this is Emmanuel's rookie year. I mean, right. I know it sounds horrible to say that. Maybe he got bigger. Maybe he put on a little bit more muscle, which shows that he is a pro and he's figured that part of it out. But as far as in between the ears, he wasn't being coached. And I look at last year as a total wash because you can't tell me from a mental standpoint of preparation for the game, he got better. He couldn't have, because he was being coached by just Glade trash bags. I mean, that's what I call it. So, so now he's being coached. He's being coached. His secondary coach coached in Pittsburgh, played in Pittsburgh. So these guys that see it, not high school, but actually played it in the NFL. And then, of course, Joe Witt and Dan Quinn, they're going to put this guy in position to be successful. If he starts day one, that's a big question. I don't know if he does. I think, for everyone saying it's not going to be Benji St. Juice either, I mean, stop it. So to me, your two starting cornerbacks might be Davis and might be St. Juice. And then you have Mikey Sandstro in the middle of the field and slot. And then Forbes will rotate in quite a bit. So he's going to be on the field. He's going to get a lot of love. I just think what we're seeing, truthfully, is that the previous regime overreached for him. He's definitely a professional football player with a lot of talent. But you had a guy like a Christian Gonzalez sitting right there on the board. You had, Banks from Maryland sitting right there on the board. And you passed over these guys who were game ready to come in and play right away. But with Forbes, you have the layer of the physical side of the game he has to get better at. Then you have the coverage now because he wasn't taught properly. So I think everything for him, you'll see him get better as the year goes on. And hopefully at the end of this year, going into year 3, he gets it. It'll be like the light bulb coming on. But this, to me, is his rookie campaign.
Lake, are you concerned about the defensive backs, the cornerbacks? I'm just curious about that, like you personally, because I know, we know that the Dallas Cowboys, they tend to take, Deron Bland wasn't a first-round pick. It's like a fifth-round pick, if I remember correctly. And, Dan Quinn has proven that he can develop cornerbacks. The same thing with Joe Witt. I'm just kind of curious, do you think, it might not be a strength of the team, but what are your thoughts on the defensive backs right now?
I think they're getting better. I do.
Okay.
I think that they have a couple really good players in the building. I mean, I like Davis. He's a pro, so he knows what he's doing. He's got a big body too. They like those rangy guys. And I think a guy like Benji St. Juice, I think they know what they have in him. So again, everything's not going to be revealed and unveiled, so to speak. They're practicing plays that when we have to leave the field, that's when they're practicing. I mean, you guys know we're out there. The video footage you see of us that we put out every day, that's individual drills, man. That's warm-ups. When that horn blows and it's 7-on-7, 11-on-11, not only is it we can't record it, it's you got to get the heck off the field. So we don't see that. So I tell people, stop looking into everything so early. This is when you're supposed to be bad. This is when you're supposed to have things to work at. Because let's just say yesterday up in Jersey, we're watching them and they're just killing the Jets, doing everything. What are we supposed to say? They looked great. And then everyone's going to say, oh, you're overdoing it. You're overblowing it. So, no, they didn't look horrible either. They didn't look that good. But it's a difference to look out of place and out of sorts and not well coached, as opposed to you can see where things can get better. And that's what it was. They're well coached. They really are. And I
that's
think
probably more important. Yeah,
absolutely. Because guess what? These coaches are so good at what they do. They're going to see what wasn't done by the player, and they'll be able to go back to them and address it and help them, as opposed to in years past, the players, they were telling me this. I'm not making this up. I have players telling me they still weren't being told what they did wrong when they obviously did something wrong. So, none of that now. None of that. This is modern football 101 at its best now.
Love it. That's good to hear. Good to hear.
The defensive tackle tandem of Payne and Allen played over 80% of the snaps the last 2 years. Sounds crazy to say that. Sounds even crazier to say that I think they didn't get hurt and we're still being extremely productive. I've got to imagine if they get anything out of some of these other D tackles they picked up, only means good things for them.
Yeah, and then one of them, I'm telling you guys, man, Johnny Newton is different. I'm saying it. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to throw it out there right now. He looks better than Deron and John Allen at this point when they were rookies. He looks better than them at that point. His burst is off the charts. There's no tackle on their roster, including John and Deron, that has his burst. It's a different type of footwork. I mean, the guy looks like he may have played soccer. I keep telling people I'm going to ask him this one day. Did you play soccer? Because his footwork reminds me eerily similar on the other side of the ball of Trent for that kind of size.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
just it's phenomenal. I'm not
He's
making
like 315, 320, right? I mean, that's a big dude.
and he's a stout. He reminds me of Aaron Donald. That's who he reminds me of. That, and I mean, yeah, we're talking about a first ballot Hall of Famer as well.
Yeah.
But if you have to make a comp, that's what people do. That's his comp. His comp is Aaron Donald. I mean, he's not the biggest dude. He's not little though, but he knows how to use his hands. That was the first thing I noticed when he came back when they activated him. Years past, when you say someone's activated, you still don't see them that first week. They're on the side. They might be in pads or they may be doing drills. This guy was out there, and I mean, slapping hands and just going by people. He did a spin move. Chris Paul, one practice they were doing one-on-one, stoned him, just like put his hands right here in the middle of Johnny Newton's pads, and he just stoned him. And then he started talking to Johnny, not trash talking, but telling him what he did. The next, literally not 5-10 minutes later, the next time it was them again, Johnny Newton did a spin move on him, and Chris Paul just whiffed. So it's just like he's got some tricks in the bag, and you can see he listens. He wants to be great. And I think that's the key thing, guys, not to stray, but with this whole draft class, these guys want to be really good football players. They're not just comfortable being in the league. Jordan McGee, mark my words, we can have this conversation literally right after the year. You're going to be like, you said it. That guy's going to have a major impact, just as much of any rookie, maybe outside of Jayden. I truly believe
that. We had Jim Nagy on the show from the Senior Bowl, and if you remember, George, he comped him to was it KOJ, the kid that the Browns drafted?
Yeah.
That's who he reminded me of. Definitely said
Awusu Karamoa. Yeah, you're right. Exactly right.
He's got all the skills. So you're not alone on that one. We've heard nothing but good things about him.
He got some guns on him too, man. When he's walking around in his shirt, he's full.
He's a good kid too, man. Really good kid. Listens to you. Just in our conversations, man. I was really impressed with him, as I am most of the guys in this group. There's no egos in this draft class. They did their due diligence and homework on who they drafted, so that there was no like me. There's none of that from this group. And they've just blended right on them with these veterans. Because you guys know sometimes veterans are hating on these young guys.
Yeah.
Get this money and they haven't done diddly. Well, no, these guys have just blended in. And I haven't seen too much, back and forth. Or I haven't seen too many rookies talking. None of that. They listen and they go out and perform too.
It seems like this rookie class could have impactful, maybe 3 to 4 starters coming from this class. One name I'm really interested in is Ben Sinnott. He was a high consideration, high upside guy. Kind of reminds me of Chris Cooley personally. I'm just kind of curious, like, where is he? How is he progressing? Like, listening to John Keim, it seems like he's more of like a blocker, more of an impactful, physical kind of tight end right now. Is he going to be more of a pass threat throughout this year? Is he still developing in that regard? Like, I guess I'm curious about the tight end room altogether. Like Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott, what's going to happen in that dynamic there?
Yeah, good points, George. I mean, I think Ben is still, coming along. I don't want to say a work in progress because that means you're not there. But there's some things he clearly has to get better at.
Okay.
But definitely a physical guy, and he knows what he needs to get better at. I think the luxury that they have is they don't have to rush him because you have Zach Ertz. I think, they don't have to rush him because you have a guy like Cole Turner who's having a decent camp from the pass catching side. So then from the blocking standpoint, John Bates isn't a pass catcher, he's a blocker. And then if you can get, something from Ben Sinnott, a combination of both, but more so of the blocking right now at this point in his career, I think the tight end room is going to be pretty set. So much so that, Amani Rodgers, before he had the Achilles injury, looked like he could have been a starter. That's how he was looking. He never really recovered from that injury as well. Wasn't having a bad camp, but I think that they just feel comfortable with what they have now, and they're just trying to develop these guys and get them up to speed. I like the tight end room. I like it because of Zach Ertz. I think just his presence makes the other 3 guys better. makes them know what it is to be a pro, how to read film, how to stay late, how to just prepare your body mentally, physically. Again, it's something to be said about having leaders who've done it at a high level show young guys how to do it, because these young guys won't develop any bad habits in their position groups at all if they see, these potential Hall of Famers and Pro Bowlers, ex-Pro Bowlers doing it.
Like the preseason games are for the bottom of the roster. Before we get out of here, let's wrap with this. Give us some names that we should be looking for on Saturday, or that you'll be looking for on Saturday.
Good point. I think you can look at Jeremy McNichols is a running back that I think is going to be the third running back. I don't think they're keeping more than 3. I don't. But I think he's
so you don't think Rodriguez will make the team?
It's going to be tough.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
McNichols has the burst, right?
Yeah, I like him. I like him a lot, but he's not one of their guys. Let's just call it like it. That's just how it works, Should he make the team? He hasn't done a whole lot. He really hasn't. So that's a name. I wasn't thinking it, but just because you brought him up, he's a name you're gonna have to see something. But I think McNichols is a guy that you'll see be featured right off the bat, because you're not going to see a lot of Brian, and you definitely won't see a lot of Austin as a longtime vet. So that De'Ami Brown now jumps to the forefront, because you're not going to see a lot of Terry. You may see a little bit of Jahan, but not as long. Luke McCaffrey, obviously. Bryson Tremaine, who's having one of the best camps of any player, period. A big guy from Stanford. He's like 6'5". He's made catches all over the field throughout camp, made plays yesterday. So I think that, he's a guy that's continuing to elevate. And a couple of weeks ago were like, he's probably going to be like a practice squad guy right away. No, I think he has a chance to be the 6th receiver, because I think Jamison Crowder would be the other one as well. So, you see that. Kaz Allen, can he do anything on special teams? He has to make an impact on that part of the game, because he's not going to crack the rotation as far as the receiver spot. So he's a guy that you can look at. And then, of course, on the offensive line, if Coleman plays, you want to see his first series, how he's doing. He, to me, is the starting left tackle from day one. And I can say.
And you're confident in that, Blake? You look good? Okay.
I don't bet, but if I did, I would throw the house money on him being the starter. He just looks like the best tackle on the team right now. And he's getting better and better and better and better. When I talked to him, he was telling me things that I don't hear normal rookies talk about setup moves and how you study your opponent and what each guy's going to do. And he said, now I can put my hands on him. And I'm like, damn, this is some good stuff, So, yeah, you can look at him.
I've heard about Jean-Baptiste at the DN position. How has he looked so far? That's a guy that maybe is getting overhyped, or just one of these guys to keep an eye out.
Yeah, he's got talent. He's definitely got talent, and he's long. Strong, long. But I just don't know how he makes this roster. I just don't. They have so much depth, and now the thing that you have to look at is, do you keep a guy that you've drafted? Most coaches do. They've invested the time to, grade this guy, go visit him, see him, and then you draft him, you bring him in. You don't want to let a guy walk away or get picked up by another team. And if you put him on practice squad, that's fine. But this draft class is going to have so much praise as the season progresses. If one of them is on the practice squad, somebody's going to pluck them, because they know these guys did their homework on their draft class. So for me, the question with Baptiste is, do you keep him and then you maybe move on from a KJ Henry, or you move on from an Andre Jones, because those weren't your guys. So those are going to be those storylines that are going to develop as the preseason goes. And guess what? Those 3 guys are going to get a lot of work. Those 3 guys might get the most work of any defensive lineman, period. So you're going to see that. Another guy's going to have to show a lot in preseason, to me, is Fedarian Mathis. I think he's definitely on the bubble right now. And, because you think about Newton and Ridgeway as 3 and 4, you've got other pieces there now. The guy Singletary they brought in has had some pretty nice practices already off the street, more visible than Fedarian. So, yeah, you're gonna have to pick it up if you're him. And then the big one, the elephant in the room, Jamin Davis.
I was going to ask you about him. Is he stable? What do you think, Lake? What are your thoughts on him?
Man, it's hard for me to say this. I don't see it right now. I just don't, because again, you're taking him on potential. Again, he's no different now from a rookie defensive end, because he's playing defensive end for the first time. They moved him there. He's getting no reps with the linebackers. He didn't even do individual drills with the linebackers.
Really?
It's defensive lineman. So think of those 3 I just named. They're young, inexpensive. You drafted Batiste. You see where I'm going with this. You free up a lot of money if you go with your own guy to be one of your depth guys and put him on special teams right now. But with Jamin, you just haven't seen a lot in practice. I haven't seen the burst. I haven't seen a whole lot of disruption. And when you see it, because there's some guys that are doing it consistently. But again, they do need edge rushers. I mean, they need someone to come to the forefront. I think, like we talked about, Dorrance Armstrong will be one of those guys. I think Cleveland Farrell will be one of those guys. Dante Fowler can be one of those guys. And these are guys that they know. Adam Peters knows Cleveland from his days when he went out to San Francisco from Oakland. So these are things that, you keep in mind. And I think that KJ Henry is going to have a really nice preseason to make it hard, to justify maybe a Jamin Davis. So, yeah, you could be looking at that.
I like KJ Henry. One last one before we get you out of here. Like, the 2 safeties, Butler and Forrest. Again, haven't heard too much. Forrest coming off the injury. Sounds like we already know who the starting safeties are. What have you seen from those guys? Should we be surprised if one of those guys doesn't make the roster?
Yeah, to me, I think the odd man out, if you have to go with a name in the secondary, it would be Defoe. I do believe that.
Wow.
I like Butler. I like Percy a lot. That's my guy. Again, having the conversations with him last year, he used to come out on my pod in DC, and him and Danny Johnson. I still wish Danny Johnson was here too, by the way. I liked him a lot. But the point is, those guys would talk about how they just weren't being prepared and they weren't being coached, and they just didn't know where they stood. And I think with Percy, you can look at him now. His confidence is back in his face. He got bigger, and he's just serious. And I think
he has a profile, athletic profile for sure. Yeah.
Yes, he does. And he's the guy that fits the Joe Whitt mode. And you look at the guy Wilson in Dallas, Percy. That's literally who he is. And that guy was coming up and cranking people, So now you have a guy that, let's just put it this way. If this defensive line does what it's supposed to do, and clearly this linebacking core does as well, the secondary doesn't have to be able to cover people for 4 seconds. They're going to be able to break on balls and make some plays back in the secondary that, they weren't able to do in years past, because there was no pass rush whatsoever. And the linebacking core was the worst I'd ever seen in my life in the NFL.
We had linebackers last year, Lake.
You know what I mean? It literally felt like it was always 8 on 11.
Yeah.
So now you have those linebackers. So you have each facet of the field. You have your front covered, you have middle part of the field covered, and now your corners and safeties can do what they do. And they're using them a lot in press coverages, which is good, because that's telling you that they're expecting their defensive line to create some chaos up front. So guys now will be close to their guy they're tracking, and they can break on some balls and get some turnovers. Hence why Dallas's defense over the last 2-3 years was number 1 in the league in turnovers.
Like, you're the best, buddy. We appreciate this.
Awesome,
I didn't realize we're almost an hour here, so you're the best. And now we'll see you in a couple of weeks, maybe.
All right, guys. Appreciate you coming on. Anytime you need me, just reach on out.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
All right.